Last time on Low Budget Binge.
The viewers believe all the theatrics are real, but it's all a sham. This sequel does what most sequels don't, which, if I'm being honest, isn't that interesting. Just when you think things can't get weirder, they do. It always ends up being about a lot of bodily fluids, but instead they chose to wash, rinse, and repeat. And if you've seen as many movies as I have, it's a quality that I appreciate more than most. This makes for a film that you can't really trust.
And now, the next death-defying chapter of Low Budget Binge.
Welcome back to ML Miller Frights, a part of the Kings of Horror Network. I'm ML Miller. While you might be watching this video on the Kings of Horror Network, I urge you to click over to my ML Miller Frights page and give it a like, share with your buddies across the electronic superhighway, click subscribe to this channel, and don't forget to ring that bell for notifications. Please get the word out to new folks so we can make the Kings of Horror Network, as well as ML Miller Frights, bigger and better. Low Budget Binge is where we venture down the paths less traveled and look at low budget, no budget, do-it-yourselves, and sometimes international films that never get that top billing you see in the usual Hollywood releases. I'll indicate in the review and down below where you can find these films, along with their trailers. Here we go. Darkness in Tenement 45 is new on-demand and digital download from Wood Entertainment. It's written and directed by Nicole Groton. After a biological weapon of some sorts hits New York, a group of survivors hunker down in their small apartment complex, divvying up supplies and hoping that one day they might be able to leave the apartment building. When supplies get low, one of the men head out into the unknown to find food and supplies, which causes an uproar for those inside, still starving and slowly losing their own humanity. Sound like a familiar situation? Yeah, we're living it. And while this film wants to tell a tale slightly more extreme than the pandemic lockdown situation we're all in right now, the similarities are abundant. This makes me wonder if people are going to want to watch Darkness in Tenement 45, as this is one of those that might be a little too close and too soon to be deemed as entertainment. Still, Darkness in Tenement 45 is a small and eloquent tale. It looks as if it were set in a timeless era. It could be World War II France, or a poor neighborhood today in New York. Darkness in Tenement 45 reminded me most of the classic Marc Caro and Jean-Pierre Jeunet fairy tale Delicatessen, as that film too depicted an apartment building overcome by poverty and fear of the outside world. The thing is, Delicatessen populated its tenement building with all sorts of odd and eccentric characters. It made venturing in and out of the apartments and corridors of the building an adventure, as the inhabitants had meager means, but vivid characteristics that differentiated them from one another. Apart from a difference in age, gender, and race, there really is nothing spectacular about the tenants in Darkness in Tenement 45. The most interesting detail of the lead, Johanna, played by Nicole Tompkins, is that she sews and dreams of leaving. Not really interesting. There is a side story about a little boy who keeps on hiding and hyperventilating every time he catches a peek at the curve on his sister's developing chest, but that's about it in terms of character. Everyone else serves as background players or varying symbols of friend or foe. I wish writer-director Nicole Groton would have put a little more character into these tenants and made them more distinct, quirky, and interesting. Darkness in Tenement 45 is a decently made and meagerly budgeted film. Its story is okay, but I think some more work on character would have helped me get into the story more. The film deals with isolation and paranoia in a low-stakes but eloquent way, as if it knows the subject matter intimately and communicates that tone very well. I just think that the suffering wasn't pushed far enough and the characters weren't challenged. It simply puts a very thin veil of change over current situations, though, and tells a standard movie with sweet and harmless but forgettable characters. A little more work on the script to punch it up could have elevated this one from good to great. Beast Within is new on-demand and digital download. It's directed by Chris Green and Steven Morana, and written by Matthew Campagna and Rudy Jackson. No, Beast Within is not a remake of the cicada rape horror flick from the 80s, but this one is more similar to The Beast Must Die, where one of the cast is a werewolf, and the fun is guessing who it is and who will be next for its dinner. A wealthy investor, played by Art Hindle, is throwing a party for the release for his latest online game sensation, a Magic the Gathering style game where one of the players is a werewolf and the rest of the guests are supposed to guess who it is. Hotshot programmer August, played by Steven Morana, who also co-directed this film, is not comfortable with the celebrity attention his work is getting him, and invites an online crush, Cheyenne, played by Holly Devereaux, to the party. But he immediately shuns her due to his nervous nature. Meanwhile, there's a real-life werewolf stalking the guests and chomping down on their vital organs, whittling the large gathering down to a few suspects who are either the werewolf or the prey. Beast Within harkens back to Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None and other whodunits that provides a large cast of suspects for the viewer to guess who will either die horribly or be the murderer themselves. Much like the online game the party is highlighting, where the fun is had as this film invites the viewer to participate in the mystery. Directors Chris Green and Steven Morana do a good job of keeping things under wraps for a good portion of the film, so fans of mystery and intrigue should look out for this low-budgeter. There are parts to Beast Within that feel a little overwritten, and I think the information shared in the narration that runs through the opening could have been dispersed through action rather than simply telling the viewer who is who. But it allows the mystery to begin earlier, so I guess I can forgive it for that. There are also some decent acting turns, including the lead, Steven Morana, who plays the fallible hero pretty well. Holly Devereaux delivers a likable role as August's spunky love interest. Another cast member of note is an actor I'm quickly beginning to respect more and more, and that is Ari Millen. He had roles in The Oak Room and I'll Take Your Dead. The actor has an intense De Niro quality combined with a little bit of Christopher Walken's otherworldly line delivery. It makes him a standout in this large cast, and I'm looking forward to seeing this actor get bigger and better roles. The Beast Within is a lo-fi flick, but one that impressed me with its strong handling of mystery and fun werewolf scenes. The wolf itself looks great and is edited to highlight the strength of those looks. This is a unique little throwback that works more than it doesn't. Asylum Twisted Horror and Fantasy Tales is new on-demand and digital download from Breaking Glass Pictures, Blue Fox Entertainment, and Red Hound Films. It's directed and written by Carlos Goitia, Damien Levesque, Chiaradine El Helou, Matt Johns, Albert Pinto, Kay Casas, Alejandro Damiani, Walgenwitz and Wishless, Andrew Desmond, Adam O'Brien, Hendrik Wachowski, Mauro Krosch, and Guillermo Lockhart. Asylum, Twisted Horror and Fantasy Tales is a collection of short films from directors all around the world. It begins with a wraparound centering on a clown, not unlike Richard Brake's clown from Rob Zombie's 31, who monologues about the horrors of life to an unknown audience. It's not bad, just a little overlong and overwritten. The actor playing the clown is decent enough. They provide a short and sweet throughway between stories, and that's really all I expect in a wraparound segment. I'm going to go over some of my favorite short films in this collection. It looks like this first short was one that inspired The Cleansing Hour, a film I just reviewed. I think I like the short more than I like the feature film length it turned into. It bores down to the basics, focusing on a charlatan priest leading faux exorcisms on a YouTube show. But when the woman bound to the chair turns out to really be possessed, the priest is forced to try to perform a real exorcism. I prefer this one because it had a much bleaker ending. Still, the feature is decent possession fun if you're looking for that. Next up is Drudge, and it's more of a proof of concept of a cool Chrome Skull-like character with an awesome multi-weapon system built into his arm gauntlet. The killer has a sweet grappling hook, a nail gun, and a bayonet all built into the gauntlet, and this short has some very solid action, but very little story to support it. A Father's Day is a surprisingly sentimental shorty as a pair of outcast zombies pair up and begin to look out for one another like a father and daughter in a decimated world. This one feels like an extension of where George Romero was going with his zombie universe, where the zombies evolve from mindless husks to eventually remembering their own humanity. I love the way this film contrasted the downright gory moments of cannibalism and zombification with soft music and gentle slow-mo, making this a rare and poignant tale of hope rather than the usual nihilistic zombie worldview. Next is R.I.P. The funeral is all set up, the food is set out, the guests are all here, but the corpse just won't cooperate. That's the premise here in R.I.P., and it's a clever and charmless story about a man who was told he would die in 48 hours by his doctor, but when the time runs out, he's still alive, much to the shock and disappointment of his wife, who has already prepared the funeral and put together a large wake in honor of his death. Wanting to save face, the wife tries everything she can to get her husband to just die already. I love this charming little short that comments on just who is a wake and funeral for, the dead or the living. Next, The Death, Dad and Son is a claymation-esque fairy tale about how the Grim Reaper balances his day-to-day business of being there when a soul passes and taking care of his preteen son. When Death Jr. disappoints his father once again, he wanders into the city and attempts to do some good, but that only triggers a zombie apocalypse. Ah, Death Jr. Fans of Wallace and Gromit, who long for a grittier and more macabre take on stop-motion animation madness, are in for a real treat with this one. These are only 5 of the 10 short films featured in Asylum, twisted horror and fantasy tales. It's a mixed bag of decent short films and quickies that I would categorize as more proof-of-concept pieces than actual narratives. The film flies by pretty quickly for a 2-hour anthology and features some electrifying visuals that occasionally work narratively too. I've definitely seen worse anthology movies. Souvenirs is new on demand and digital download from Shinehouse Group and Studio Fest. It's directed by Anna Mikami and written by Matthew Sorvillo. Gail, played by Isabella Pisacane, works for her grandmother's shop called Morbid Curiosities, which buys and sells all kinds of weird stuff, including serial killer memorabilia. When a series of murders begin occurring in the area, the shop piques the interest of a cop investigating the crimes named Janice, played by Rosa Gilmore. When Gail begins receiving unmarked boxes of memorabilia and strange phone calls identifying the contents of the box as trinkets tied to the most recent killings, she's perplexed as to what to do with it. The killer on the phone reveals to Gail that she may have familial ties to a serial killer herself. With her grandmother, Margot, played by Jamie Donnelly, never revealing any information to Gail about her past, Gail begins to believe what the voice on the phone is saying. Meanwhile, the bodies are piling up, all with ties to the shop. I once went to a serial killer convention on a lark a while back, and it was an extremely odd experience for me. Not only because that this event was sort of celebrating and aggrandizing those who took the life of others, but also for the morbid trinkets on display and the folks drawn to the subject matter. While I don't want to pass judgment on those who attended the convention, it did have a darker feel to it than regular horror conventions I've been to. One can understand why it would be the perfect sort of fodder to make a downright creepy movie, and that's exactly what Souvenirs is. Still, the film has a dark and foreboding feel to it that I really couldn't shake after watching. Souvenirs is more of a darkly psychological mystery thriller than a straight-up horror film. It's not a film that looks for a high body count or splatter. The film is much more of a character piece, examining where violent acts come from. The old nature or nurture argument, whether the need to take a life is in the blood or in the upbringing. For Gail, it might be both, as the odds are stacked against her that she has serial killer in her genes. Still, that doesn't make her a serial killer, or does it? The mystery comes from whether or not we can trust the protagonist we've been following for the entire film. Even though this isn't your typical slasher film, I enjoyed watching Gail's journey of discovery mainly because the acting in Souvenirs is top-notch. Isabella Pisacane has a wonderful Angela Bettis quality as Gail, where she seems very innocent, but may very well have a more twisted side. Her morbid sense of humor and awkward way of interacting with the world causes both unease and sympathy. Other standouts are Abby Awe as Gail's plucky and lovable friend Alexa, and the off-kilter demeanor of Jamie Donnelly, who plays Grandma Margot. There's also a nice small performance by Craig Walker as an incarcerated serial killer that felt genuine and surprisingly nuanced. All around, this is a well-acted little film. Souvenirs isn't bombastic or in your face. It's a subtle look at a girl in crisis who is desperate to find out about her past, but also is afraid of what she will find. This is a quiet and soulful offering that is chilling without going about the usual horror route of excess and oversaturation. I'd recommend this to those who like horror on the more subtler side. Finally, there is Spell, which is new on-demand and digital download from Paramount Pictures. Spell is directed by Mark Tonderai and written by Kurt Wimmer. When well-to-do lawyer Mark Omari Hardwick gets word that his father has passed, he rents a plane and flies it to the backwoods of Appalachia Territory with his family on board. The plane hits turbulence and ends up crashing. Mark wakes up in the rural home of Eloise, played by Loretta Devine, a practitioner of dark hoodoo magic. Wounded and dazed, Mark has no idea where his family are and who this woman is taking care of him. As he gains his wits, Mark realizes that Eloise is up to no good as she won't let him leave and seems to be preparing for a ceremony taking place on the eve of a blood moon, which is only a few nights away. While Spell isn't perfect, it does one thing that many other films get wrong. It offers up a glimpse at folk horror and voodoo magic and makes it terrifying. Director Mark Tonderai and writer Kurt Wimmer make the magic palpable, potent, and personal as Mark endures Eloise's spells, potions, and trickery. You can count the number of good and scary voodoo hoodoo movies on one hand, and Spell can be added to that short list. Sure, there are plenty of voodoo films, but they just never got under my skin. Spell uses the simplicity of the spells, the small details of the potions and powers Eloise uses, and the wince-inducing terrors that Mark endures, and it works. I have to commend this film for getting it right. This isn't anything goes magic going on. Eloise's power has a set of rules that we clearly learn early, which helps make it more threatening. There are numerous scenes that are full of tension, solid scares, and some absolutely toe-curling gore that work where other films attempting to illustrate the power of mysticism fail miserably. In many ways, this is an Appalachia magic version of Misery, with Eloise keeping Mark in bed by any means possible for dark designs. While Spell follows a lot of the same beats as Misery, the down-home setting and use of magic with its own set of rules makes things feel fresh. There's even a scene in Spell that rivals Misery's hobbling scene that is almost as gruesome. It helps a lot that Hardwick and Devine are pretty great together as Mark and Eloise. Eloise seems to have the whole thing planned out, but Mark's originally from the area as well, and his familiarity with the dark arts really makes this a formidable matchup. Despite the solid performances, strong conflict, and apt use of magic, Spell has some pretty big problems. The theme of city folk looking down on country folk is dropped halfway through to make it a much more convenient and conventional ending. When you add the fact that Mark and his family are black but seem to be racist and classist towards the black people from the Appalachian County, it makes things extremely interesting as the subject of interracial classism is one that many in Hollywood wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. One might think a dark lesson should be learned in Spell, as Mark and his family all have moments of being pretty uppity towards the poorer community Eloise represents. But while Spell goes there at the beginning, once Mark wakes up at Eloise's place, the theme is dropped almost entirely, and the point is to get the family together and get out alive from these monsters. The finale of Spell is all over the place. In one scene, Mark is in the barn trying to save his family. In the next scene, he's chasing down a police car a mile away, only to be followed by another scene where Mark is back in the barn and taking on Eloise again. The rules established in the earlier portions of the film are tossed out the window to favor Mark's spells. Scenes are set up off camera only to be flashed back to awkwardly, and suddenly this dark art is easily mastered by a novice. The final moments almost undercut the potency of the first hour. I liked a lot of Spell, as it really knows how to make backwoods magic macabre, exciting, and personal. But be prepared to slap your head hard in the final moments, as this film richly misses the landing by a country mile. That'll be it for today. Please chime in the comments and let me know what you think of this video, how on the nose or mind-numbingly wrong I am, or you can counter with your own review. If you like this video, please pound that thumbs up button. Share this video with your social media addicted pals. If you're looking for written reviews, you can find them on mlmillerwrites.com. Don't forget, I have 2 new horror comic book trade paperbacks you should look for. Grave Trancers is out right now, and Pirouette, collecting never-before published issues, will be out in November 18th in only the finest of comic book stores. And be sure to subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for alerts to be the first to see my future videos. Thank you so much for your time, and take care.
You're doomed.